All right. Hello, class. Welcome to the end. This is week 10. I'm your professor, Dr. Brant Ellsworth. This week in our readings, we will be looking at the tragic, bloody American Civil War. In order to start, let me ask you a question. Now, if you were writing a sentence, and the subject of your sentence was the United States, take a moment and write that on a sheet of paper. United States. Now, would you write is or are as your verb? The United States is big or are big? Now think about it. If the United States is a singular noun, something like he or she, then the United States is big is correct. If it's a singular noun, meaning it's a single entity. If the United States is a large country, and that its primary definition is that of a federal level country, then in of itself it is a singular noun. It is the United States is big. However, if you look closely at the words of what makes up the United States, united could be an adjective to describe the states, plural. The United States is a amalgamation of a unified grouping of states, plural. So, if you think the United States is truly about the states which are unified, then the United States would be a plural noun. Plural noun would be the United States are big. Now, you might think this is a silly question, that one sounds right, one sounds wrong, but the way that you would answer that question tells me a lot about a couple things. It tells me about your political views. Often, Democrats think big scale, large scale. They're in favor of having more federal rights, more federal oversight, a larger government. Oftentimes, conservatives are more likely to argue for a small government, to have more states' rights. When we look at the actual Constitution and look at how the Founding Fathers established this country, you would probably be surprised that the Founding Fathers' views of what this country is are very different than how they're in practice today. You'll note, for instance, in the Constitution, the first few articles outline what the specific powers of each branch of the government are. It provides specific examples of those powers. It starts with the role of Congress. It then talks about the presidency, and then talks about the judiciary. Of the three, the Congress is the largest section, has the most rules, the most stipulations. And importantly, in the 10th Amendment, the Constitution says that, and I'm speaking without looking at it, just off the top of my head here, the 10th Amendment says that anything that's not expressly given to the federal government, as outlined in the Article 1, 2, or 3 of the Constitution, is therefore then reserved for the states. Meaning, the Founding Fathers, when establishing this country, established a fairly weak federal government with only a few expressed powers or rights. The rest of those rights or powers were then to be absorbed by the states. In other words, the Founding Fathers believed in a strong state governments. They truly believed that we were a collection of united states. Since then, and looking specifically at major moments in the American past, moments like the American Civil War, like the Great Depression and FDR's New Deal, like the aftermath of 9/11, we have seen that in the moments of these tragedies, the federal government has assumed a larger and larger role. The Civil War was fought. The North essentially said the South did not have the right, the Southern states did not have the right to separate themselves from this designation of the country. You cannot rebel, and we will force you to stay in line through the use of the national government or the national military. During the Great Depression and the New Deal, FDR comes in and says, the role of the government is to stimulate the economy, is to create jobs. And as such, FDR took unprecedented powers to act in ways that the Supreme Court has since found some to be unconstitutional, but it was able to expand the power of the presidency far outside of the stipulations established in the, Article 2 of the Constitution. After 9/11, President Bush did much the same, expanding the powers of the presidency and of the federal government to levels that were not within lines of the United States Constitution. So, that's a long introduction to this topic. Essentially, though, the Civil War is a pivotal moment in our country's history. It is a moment that will swing, perhaps for the first time, the power of the federal government so that it outweighs the power of states. Do not be confused that despite what history teachers today teach, the Civil War was fought over the issue of slavery. There has been a forgetting, a willful alternative approach to teaching the American Civil War that has taken place in the aftermath of the war. As historians argue that it was more important to find ways of establishing unity in the aftermath, that instead of sowing the seeds of disharmony, we will write, so these historians said, we will write the critical component played by African Americans out of the Civil War. So just to ensure that we're all on the same page here, the Civil War was fought over the issue of slavery. You can disagree with me, but you will be wrong. How's that? All right. In terms of primary sources this week, we have a couple. Alexander Stephens on slavery, the Confederate Constitution in 1861. A series of poems about Civil War nurses, which provides some on-the-ground look at the experiences of those who were near the war. We have Ambrose Bierce, a famous American author who will recount some of his experiences. I really like this one because it helps transport me back to this time to understand the fear, the anxieties that a soldier must have felt. And then finally, Abraham Lincoln's second inaugural address of 1865, uttered just a few weeks before he was assassinated. In terms of assignments this week, we have a discussion board. Your posts are due on Wednesday with 2 responses due by Sunday, a reading quiz due by Sunday, and our Week 10 primary source analysis. This will be it for our textbook readings. Next week, Week 11, will be largely a week for reflection and for the sharing of our primary research projects. I look forward to seeing them next week. Please email me with any questions, brantellsworth@centralpenn.edu. All right, farewell, class.